Hey folks, my name is Nate Salzman. I'm with Jefferson Patterson Park, and today we are going to be making a poplar bark basket. You might be wondering, what is a poplar bark basket? Well, a poplar bark basket is a basket that is actually made from the bark of a poplar tree. If we get a poplar tree during the right time of year, we can actually take the bark and peel it off and then use it for making baskets. And that's what we're going to do today. But before we can get started making our basket, we obviously have to go and cut down a tree. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go head out into the woods and try and find the perfect poplar tree to make our basket from. Awesome, let's go for it.
Well, hello there, Mr. Turtle. How are you doing today?
Well, I'll leave you to it. All right, folks, so now that we went out in the woods, we got our nice piece of poplar. I'm going to actually start getting it ready. So the first thing I have to do is I have to actually peel the bark from my tree. So I'm going to use my handy dandy knife for that. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually look at my tree limb and see if there's anywhere where the bark has already started splitting. Right here I can see there's already a crack, so I'm just going to carry that crack along. So I'm going to take the tip of my knife and just keep scoring that line. There's really nothing to it, just making sure that I'm going all the way through the bark. Trying to keep this line straight so that my basket edges are straight. And even though this looks like a long, skinny piece, it's going to actually make a pretty good-sized basket. Perfect. Next thing I need to do, I'm going to need a tool to actually peel up the bark. And I'm going to actually use another limb of poplar to help me out with that. There we go. And now with my handy dandy tool, I'm just going to slip it in between the layers. Sometimes I'll even use my knife to help me get it started. And if you listen, you can even hear the sound of it slipping up, the bark slipping off. And once I've got it started, I can take my tool and slide it right underneath the bark, and you can hear it. It's got such a nice sound. It's like... Okay, folks, so now that we've got our bark peeled, we now have to actually start shaping this. As you can see at the bottom of our basket, it's actually shaped sort of like a football, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to actually cut a football into this area. And when we score our football shape, what we're really doing is we're making a spot for our basket to fold on. So we're basically creating the creases for the bottom of our basket. Now this piece is very long, but you're going to realize that once it folds, it's going to be a lot shorter. However, this is going to be a pretty good-sized basket. I think what I'm going to go for is a new bow quiver. So I want something that's fairly long, probably about this length, I'd say. Maybe a little longer, a little shorter. That seems about right. I'm going to flip it around, and then I'm going to very carefully flatten it out. And I say very carefully because if you're not careful, you'll actually crack your material. So I'm just very gently spreading it open little by little, trying to get it to spread all the way. And I don't need it to get completely flat. I just want it flat enough that I can start to work on it and cut it. And again, I'm not going to cut all the way through. What I'm really just doing is I'm making a weak spot. And I can't see where I marked it, so I'm just going to remark it. So this seems like about the right length for a bow quiver. So I'm just gonna start scoring my football. And the trick to this is you want to make sure that your lines go all the way to the end. You want to make sure that they meet up. If they don't meet up, what will happen is there will be a little gap in your football shape. I'm going to do just one more cut. This knife is pretty sharp, so I know I won't have to score it too much. Now, if I was using stone tools, this process might take me a little bit longer, but it still wouldn't take me very long. This is a pretty fast thing you can make. All right, now I'm going to see how it folds. I'm going to actually hold it, both hands, one on either side of my bend. I'm just going to gently start opening it up. And the reason why I'm going to do this gently is because this is usually where you run into problems, is people try and rush this, and then they end up splitting their whole piece of material. And I can see already this is going to bend pretty nicely. I can see the crease line already forming for this side. So before I go too far, I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to start bending the other side too. And again, I'm going to actually start by just making sure the corners are nice and bent. I've already got one little problem area right over here opening up, so I'm going to be really careful of that. I want to make sure that I get a good bend going so that doesn't open up any further. If it's just a little bit like that, it's not the end of the world. If it gets too much bigger, I might have problems. Oh, there we go. Starting to come up. Check it out. That's pretty fast. So now what I have to do is I have to actually make the holes so that I can actually tie the thing together. Because right now, it's just going to flop open and closed. The reason why I started by making my fold in the bottom is because I want to work on this while it is as wet as possible. Even just in a couple of minutes, this is going to start to dry out. So I want to work pretty quick. So now that I've gotten that fold already in there, if it starts to dry out a little bit, at least it has that natural crease. And on this side, you can actually see how those creases have opened up. So those little cut lines, you can see they've opened up a little bit. That's exactly what I want. So now I got to go and make all my holes. Hey folks, so I just got one last thing that I need to make, which is I have to make a piece to go around the very top of my basket to help reinforce it. So I'm actually going to take a scrap piece of bark, I'm going to cut myself a little sliver, and that's going to actually be my reinforcement for the top. And that looks about right, maybe a little thinner. There we go. Since it's going to be on the inside, if it isn't perfect, it doesn't really matter. Alright, so now we're ready to put it all together. I've got my bark, I've got my piece of reinforcement, and now I'm just going to grab some lacing, and then I'm going to start lacing the whole thing up. Awesome, let's go for it. So we finished lacing up the edge of our basket, but now we got to worry about our rim because our rim is looking a little cattywampus. So we're going to actually fix that using those pieces of bark that we got earlier. So I'm just going to curl it up and make it a little bit smaller than my hole is so I can fit it in. I'm going to let it spread out, sort of stretch it. There we go. Now the next step that I got to do is I actually have to lace this into place. This way it doesn't move around, and that's why I left myself all this extra slack. And I've got some holes drilled around here, so I'm just going to lace it up. Alright folks, that's all there is to it. My poplar basket is done. If I really wanted to make this extra special, I could actually take a stone tool. I could actually carve into this bark. If I carve in this bark, the inner layer of the bark will actually be a lot paler, so I could draw things like designs on it. But honestly, I like the way it looks as is. I think this looks phenomenal. This is gonna be really nice. If you have poplar trees on your property, I definitely suggest trying this out. Just understand that whatever you cut, it's not going to heal anywhere higher up. So removing the bark is probably going to kill the tree unless you're taking just a branch. So yeah. Next week for our lunchtime learning, Ms. Liz and I are doing an awesome cooking demonstration. We're actually going to be both trying to cook the same recipe and seeing just how different you can cook the same thing. So as always, on behalf of Jefferson Patterson Park, stay active, but also stay safe. Thanks.